Welcome back to Stellar HFY. First off, thank you. The response to our recent stories about human tactical brilliance has been absolutely incredible. Today's story is about how humanity turned 18 months of systematic defeat into the most brilliant 10-minute counterattack in galactic history, and why sometimes the best way to win a war is to make your enemy's greatest strength become their fatal weakness. So settle in and get ready to see how 50 alien battlecruisers learned that when you threaten humanity's homeworld, you better make sure your own technology can't be turned against you. Sir, they're here. 50 battlecruisers just dropped out of hyperspace at the outer marker. The Vorth have come for Earth. Admiral Jackson Corrick didn't flinch, as the words that had haunted his nightmares for 18 months finally became reality. Standing on the bridge of the UES Defiance, he watched the tactical display populate with red icons that represented the end of everything humanity had built among the stars. Each alien vessel was 3 times the size of his flagship, armed with plasma cannons that could turn continents into glass, and backed by the technological superiority that had crushed every human colony from the outer rim to the core worlds. Confirmed visual on the Vorth formation, Lieutenant Commander Hayes reported from the sensor station, his voice steady despite the sweat beading on his forehead. They're maintaining standard blockade positions around Earth's outer defense perimeter. Sir, their energy signatures, we're looking at enough firepower to crack the planet in half. Corrick nodded grimly, his weathered hands clasped behind his back as he studied the enemy formation with the cold focus of a man who had spent every waking moment of the last year and a half preparing for this exact scenario. The Vorth weren't here for conquest or negotiation. They had come to erase humanity from existence, just as they had erased the colonies at New Sparta, Kepler Prime, and 17 other worlds that had dared to expand beyond the boundaries the aliens deemed acceptable. Send acknowledgement of their presence, Corrick ordered. Let them know we're receiving their transmission. And Hayes, get me Chief Engineer Nash. It's time to see if 18 months of preparation was enough. The alien voice that filled the bridge carried the cold efficiency of an executioner reading a death warrant. Human military vessels. This is Hierarchus Zeth of the Vorth Expeditionary Force. Your species' expansion has been analyzed and deemed a threat to galactic stability. Earth will be sterilized. Your defensive capabilities have been studied and found insufficient. Surrender is not acceptable. This is not a negotiation. The transmission cut off, leaving the bridge in tense silence. Around Corrick, 200 officers and crew members who represented the last of humanity's deep space naval capacity waited for orders that would determine whether their species lived or died. The weight of 8 billion lives pressed down on the Admiral's shoulders like a physical force. But underneath that crushing responsibility lay something the Vorth couldn't have anticipated: knowledge. Chief Engineer Tobias Nash entered the bridge with the quick, purposeful stride of a man who had spent 18 months turning theoretical physics into humanity's last hope. His graying hair was disheveled from countless sleepless nights in the engineering labs, but his eyes burned with the intensity of someone who had found the key to the impossible. Admiral, the modifications are complete, Nash reported, his voice carrying barely controlled excitement. Every mining drone, every EMP generator, every magnetic attachment system we've built is based on solid intelligence from the New Sparta wreckage. If our analysis is correct, we can turn their own technology against them. Corrick remembered the desperate transmission from New Sparta colony 18 months ago, when Captain Morrison had reported something unprecedented. Human forces had actually managed to disable a Vorth reconnaissance ship before the base was overrun. The victory had lasted less than an hour before alien reinforcements arrived to complete the massacre. But in that brief window, Morrison's engineers had downloaded everything they could from the damaged enemy vessel before evacuation. Walk me through it one more time, Tobias, Corrick said quietly. 8 billion lives are riding on your analysis being correct. Nash pulled up a holographic display showing the internal structure of a Vorth battlecruiser, his finger tracing the energy conduits that ran like arteries through the alien ship's hull. Their plasma cannon system is incredibly powerful, but it has one critical vulnerability. During the charging sequence, massive amounts of energy cycle through primary conduits that become magnetically polarized. For exactly 4.7 seconds during each firing cycle, those conduits act like giant electromagnets, drawing any metallic object towards specific points on their hull. And that's when they're vulnerable, Korik said, understanding the elegant simplicity of the plan that had consumed their preparations. Exactly. We've modified standard mining equipment with EMP generators scavenged from destroyed colony defense grids. If we can attach these devices directly to their hull plates during the charging sequence, the electromagnetic pulse will overload the polarized conduits at the moment of maximum energy flow. Their own weapons become bombs inside their ships. Lieutenant Commander Hayes looked up from his console with barely controlled anxiety. Sir, it's a brilliant plan, but the requirements. We need to get close enough to attach devices to their hulls while they're charging weapons to fire at us. The timing has to be perfect, and we'll only get one chance. Korik walked to the massive view screen showing Earth hanging in space like a blue jewel surrounded by the dark shapes of alien vessels that had come to destroy it. The smart tactical decision would be to disperse his fleet, protect the evacuation routes, and conduct a fighting withdrawal that might save some fraction of humanity. Instead, he was about to gamble everything on an untested theory based on 18 months of analysis of a single damaged enemy ship. Tobias, are you certain about the magnetic polarization effect? As certain as I can be without actually testing it in combat, Nash replied honestly. The physics are sound, the energy patterns match our models, and we've verified the effect using salvaged components. But Admiral, we're talking about turning mining equipment into weapons of war against technology that's centuries ahead of ours. Korik nodded, his decision crystallizing with the clarity that came from having no alternatives. Then that's what we'll do. We're not going to fight them ship to ship, and we're not going to run. We're going to use their methodical nature against them, just like they used our predictability against us. The intercom crackled with an urgent message from the communications center. Admiral, we're receiving the formal ultimatum from the Vorth fleet. They're giving us 72 hours to evacuate Earth completely before they begin orbital bombardment. 72 hours, Korik repeated, a cold smile playing at the corners of his mouth. More than enough time to implement Nash's plan. Send word to all ship commanders. We're not evacuating Earth. We're going to save it, and we're going to do it by making the Vorth's greatest strength become their fatal weakness. Hierarchist, the humans are responding exactly as psychological warfare doctrine predicts. Panic, desperate evacuation attempts, and complete breakdown of military coordination. Hierarchist Zeth stood on the command bridge of his flagship, the Annihilator, watching the primitive human vessels scurry away from their dying world like insects fleeing a flame. In his 4 centuries of military service, he had overseen the systematic elimination of 19 species that had dared to expand beyond their allocated territories. The pattern was always identical: overwhelming technological demonstration, false mercy through evacuation offers, then methodical destruction of fleeing populations to break any remaining will to resist. Excellent, Zeth replied, his mandibles clicking with satisfaction. Maintain blockade formation and monitor their evacuation efforts. When the deadline expires, we will demonstrate the futility of resistance by destroying their fleeing ships first. The survivors on the planet will surrender immediately once they witness the fate of those who tried to escape. Down on Earth, Admiral Korik stood in the emergency command bunker beneath Geneva, watching the genuine evacuation ships launch from spaceports around the globe. Unlike the previous deception 18 months in the making, these were real civilian transports carrying real families desperate to escape the coming Holocaust. The sight tore at his conscience, but the brutal mathematics of survival left no room for sentiment. Admiral, the Vorth are maintaining standard blockade positions 50,000 kilometers out, Lieutenant Commander Hayes reported. They're not interfering with evacuation traffic, which matches the psychological warfare pattern we identified from the other colony attacks. Of course they're not, Korik replied grimly. They want those ships to launch. It's easier to murder fleeing civilians than to hunt down resistance fighters hiding on a planet. They've done this 19 times before, Hayes. They know exactly how to break a species' will to fight. Chief Engineer Nash burst into the command center, his face flushed with excitement and exhaustion. Admiral, we've completed the modifications to the mining fleet. Every drone, every EMP generator, every magnetic attachment system is ready for deployment. But sir, I have to be honest about the risks. We're asking industrial equipment to perform military functions it was never designed for. Korik turned to face his chief engineer, seeing in Nash's eyes the same desperate hope that burned in every human heart. Tobias, in your professional opinion, what are our chances of success? If our analysis of the Vorth power systems is correct, if the magnetic polarization effect works as predicted, if we can coordinate the timing perfectly, and if their sensors dismiss our drones as background debris. Nash paused, running calculations in his head. Maybe 30% chance of significant damage to their fleet. Maybe. And if we fight them conventionally? 0%. They'll destroy us without taking meaningful casualties. Commander Felix Stone entered the bunker, his uniform still smeared with grease from the drone preparation bays. As humanity's foremost expert in automated mining systems, Stone had spent the last 6 months turning peaceful industrial equipment into weapons of war. Admiral, the asteroid belt positioning is complete. We have 12,000 modified mining drones distributed throughout the belt, all disguised as standard debris. The Vorth sensors should read them as nothing more than space junk. Korik studied the tactical holograms showing the asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter, now seeded with thousands of tiny devices that represented humanity's last hope. Each drone carried an EMP generator powerful enough to overload alien power systems, but only if they could attach to enemy hulls during the critical window when Vorth plasma cannons were charging. Stone, walk me through the deployment sequence one more time. Yes, sir. The drones are programmed to remain passive until they detect the specific electromagnetic signature of Vorth plasma cannon charging cycles. When the alien ships enter the belt and begin target acquisition, their weapons will start the charging sequence. The energy cycling through their conduits creates powerful magnetic fields that will draw our drones directly to the attachment points we've identified from the new Sparta intelligence. Lieutenant Commander Hayes looked up from his communications console with growing concern. Sir, we're getting reports from the evacuation coordinators. The civilian ships are asking why our military vessels are moving toward the asteroid belt instead of forming protective escorts. They're scared, Admiral. People are starting to panic. The weight of command had never felt heavier than at this moment. Korik was asking 8 billion people to trust him with their lives based on a plan that had never been tested in actual combat. Every instinct of naval tradition screamed that he should be protecting the evacuation ships, not positioning his fleet for what appeared to be a suicidal assault. Send word to the evacuation coordinators, Korik ordered. Tell them that Admiral Korik has a plan, and that plan requires our fleet to be in the asteroid belt when the Vorth arrive. Don't give them details. Just tell them to trust us one more time. On the bridge of the Annihilator, Hierarchist Zeth reviewed the intelligence reports with growing satisfaction. The human military vessels are positioning themselves in the asteroid belt between the 4th and 5th planets. Classic defensive posturing using terrain for cover. They believe the asteroids will provide protection against our plasma cannons. His tactical officer, a veteran of 12 successful planetary sterilizations, clicked his approval. Hierarchist, this matches the behavior pattern from the Keller resistance at Wolf 359. They also attempted to use asteroid fields for defensive advantage. Our plasma cannons cut through the asteroids like vapor and eliminated their fleet in 18 minutes. Maintain current approach vector, Zeth commanded. Let the humans cower behind their rocks. When we demonstrate that asteroids provide no protection against Vorth firepower, their will to resist will collapse completely. Then we can complete the sterilization of their world without further interference. Back in the Geneva bunker, Korik felt the familiar cold calm that came before battle. Around him, the command staff worked with quiet efficiency, coordinating the most desperate gamble in human history. The plan was insane by every conventional measure. Position the entire remaining human fleet in a killing zone, bait the enemy into optimal firing positions, then trust that 18 months of engineering analysis could turn mining equipment into ship-killing weapons. Admiral, Nash reported, all EMP generators are online and synchronized. Drone positioning is optimal. We're as ready as we're ever going to be. Stone, confirm drone activation protocols. Confirmed, sir. The moment Vorth plasma cannons begin charging, our drones will be drawn to their hulls by the magnetic polarization effect. EMP detonation is programmed for the peak energy moment in their firing cycle. Korik nodded, his eyes fixed on the tactical display showing 50 red icons representing the alien fleet advancing toward Earth's asteroid belt. Somewhere above them, Hierarchist Zeth was probably congratulating himself on another successful psychological warfare campaign, never suspecting that he was leading his fleet directly into the most elaborate trap in human history. All stations, this is Admiral Korik. In approximately 6 hours, the Vorth fleet will enter the asteroid belt, expecting to find cowering humans hiding behind rocks. Instead, they're going to discover that sometimes underestimating your enemy's intelligence is a fatal mistake. Today, we're going to show them what happens when you threaten humanity's homeworld. The countdown to humanity's last stand had begun. Contact! Vorth fleet is entering the asteroid belt perimeter. All ships maintaining perfect formation, sir. They're coming in exactly as predicted. Commander Felix Stone's voice crackled through the communications array in the Geneva bunker, his words carrying the weight of 18 months of preparation in humanity's last hope. Admiral Korik stood motionless before the tactical display, watching 50 red icons advance through the asteroid belt like predators stalking wounded prey. Each alien battlecruiser moved with mechanical precision, their sensors sweeping the rocky debris field where humanity's remaining fleet waited in apparent desperation. Stone, confirm drone status across all sectors, Korik ordered, his voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through his veins. I need to know that every single one of those devices is in position and ready to activate. Confirmed, Admiral. 12,000 modified mining drones distributed throughout sectors Alpha through Zulu. They're reading as standard asteroid debris on our passive sensors, which means the Vorth shouldn't be able to distinguish them from natural space junk either. The electromagnetic signatures are completely masked until activation. On the bridge of his flagship hidden behind a massive asteroid cluster, Stone watched his tactical screens with the focused intensity of a surgeon performing life-saving operations. For 6 months, he had lived and breathed the conversion of peaceful mining equipment into weapons of war. Every drone positioned in the belt represented hundreds of hours of modifications, calibrations, and desperate hope that industrial technology could somehow defeat military hardware centuries more advanced than anything humanity possessed. Hierarchist Zeth stood on the command deck of the Annihilator, studying the sensor readings with the satisfaction of a hunter who had cornered his prey. The human fleet was exactly where his tactical computers had predicted, cowering behind asteroids in a futile attempt to use terrain as protection against superior firepower. His mandibles clicked with amusement as he watched the primitive human vessels spread throughout the belt like frightened animals seeking shelter. Tactical analysis confirms human defensive positioning, Hierarchist, his weapons officer reported. They have concentrated their remaining forces in 3 primary clusters, attempting to use the largest asteroids as shields. Standard defensive doctrine for inferior technology facing overwhelming force. How perfectly predictable, Zeth replied, his 3 eyes narrowing as he calculated firing solutions that would cut through the asteroid field like a plasma scythe through grain. They truly believe that hiding behind rocks will save them from weapons that can glass entire continents. Maintain approach vector and prepare primary batteries. We will demonstrate the futility of their position before completing planetary sterilization. The Vorth fleet advanced deeper into the asteroid belt, their sensors focused on the large human warships that registered as legitimate military threats. The alien scanning systems, calibrated to detect battleships, destroyers, and cruisers, completely ignored the thousands of small objects scattered throughout the debris field. To Vorth sensors, the mining drones appeared as nothing more than metallic asteroids, space junk that posed no threat to ships armored against planetary bombardment. In the Geneva bunker, Chief Engineer Nash monitored the energy readings from the advancing alien fleet with surgical precision. Everything depended on the Vorth behaving exactly as their previous 19 conquests had shown, methodical, predictable, and completely confident in their technological superiority. Admiral, I'm detecting the preliminary energy buildup in their primary weapon systems, Nash reported, his voice tight with controlled excitement. They're beginning the charging sequence for coordinated plasma cannon fire. If our analysis is correct, their power conduits should start magnetic polarization in approximately 90 seconds. Korik felt the familiar cold calm that came in the moments before battle, when months of planning crystallized into seconds of decisive action. Around him, the command staff worked with quiet efficiency, monitoring readings that would determine whether humanity lived or died. The weight of 8 billion lives pressed down on his shoulders. But underneath that crushing responsibility lay something the Vorth had never encountered. Human ingenuity turned into a weapon. Stone, are you seeing the energy patterns? Confirmed, Admiral. The charging sequence is exactly what we predicted from the new Sparta intelligence. Their plasma conduits are starting to polarize, creating powerful magnetic fields around specific points on their hull. The drones should start reacting to the magnetic pull in 60 seconds. Commander Stone watched his screens as thousands of seemingly inert objects began to stir throughout the asteroid belt. The mining drones, programmed to remain passive until they detected the specific electromagnetic signature of Vorth weapons charging, suddenly came alive as magnetic fields powerful enough to bend metal began emanating from the alien ships. Each drone carried an EMP generator capable of overloading power systems, but only if they could attach to enemy hulls at precisely the right moment. Hierarchus Zeth observed the human fleet with growing anticipation as his weapons reached optimal charge levels. The plasma cannons had never failed to deliver overwhelming destruction, and today would be no different. His tactical computers calculated firing solutions that would eliminate every human vessel in the belt within minutes, clearing the way for planetary bombardment. Hierarchist, detecting minor gravitational anomalies throughout the debris field, his sensor officer reported. Small metallic objects appear to be shifting position, but readings suggest natural gravitational effects from our fleet's mass. Ignore it, Zeth commanded dismissively. Focus on primary targets. Prepare to fire on my command. What the Vorth sensors registered as natural gravitational attraction was actually something far more dangerous. 12,000 mining drones being pulled toward their ships by the magnetic fields generated by charging plasma weapons. Each drone moved slowly, deliberately, drawn to specific attachment points that 18 months of analysis had identified as optimal for maximum system disruption. In the Geneva bunker, Nash watched the energy readings spike as Vorth weapons approached full charge. Admiral, magnetic polarization is at maximum. The drones are being drawn to their hulls exactly as predicted. Attachment should be complete in 30 seconds. Stone, confirm drone proximity to targets. Confirmed, sir. We have successful attachment across all sectors. Every Vorth ship now has multiple drones in direct contact with their hull plating. EMP generators are armed and synchronized for simultaneous activation. Korik stared at the tactical display, where 50 alien battlecruisers hung in space like metal vultures, their weapons charged and ready to deliver humanity's death sentence. Unknown to them, each ship now carried the seeds of its own destruction. Mining equipment turned into electromagnetic bombs, attached to their hulls and waiting for the signal that would turn their greatest strength into their fatal weakness. All stations, prepare for activation on my command, Korik announced. In 10 seconds, we're going to show the Vorth what happens when you underestimate human intelligence. The moment that would determine humanity's fate was at hand. All weapons charged and ready, Hierarchist. The human fleet is completely exposed. Shall we demonstrate the futility of their resistance? Hierarchist Zeth raised his primary appendage to give the firing command that would eliminate the last organized human military force in the galaxy. His three eyes fixed on the tactical display showing cowering human ships, scattered throughout the asteroid belt. In 4 centuries of military service, he had never failed to break an enemy's will through superior firepower, and today would be no different. The primitive mammals would watch their pathetic fleet disintegrated in minutes, then beg for mercy that would never come. Fire at will, Zeth commanded. Show them the power of... His order was cut off by Admiral Korik's voice, crackling across every communication frequency in the solar system, carrying the cold authority of a man who had turned certain death into ultimate victory. Alien fleet said, Earth will be erased. Human Admiral said, then let's start with yours. All stations, execute activation now. In the Geneva bunker, Commander Stone's finger found the activation switch with the precision of a concert pianist, striking the final note of humanity's greatest symphony. 12,000 mining drones attached to Vorth hulls throughout the fleet received their synchronized command at exactly the same instant. The EMP generators, powered by the same industrial fusion cells that had driven humanity's expansion among the stars, discharge their accumulated energy directly into alien power systems at the moment of maximum magnetic polarization. The first indication that Hierarchus Zeth's universe had fundamentally changed came not as an explosion, but as a sound his species had never heard before, the screaming of metal under impossible stress. His flagship's hull began to buckle as electromagnetic pulses, delivered from devices his sensors had dismissed as space debris, overloaded the plasma conduits that should have been delivering death to human targets. Impossible, Zeth whispered, his mandibles trembling as damage reports flooded his command center. The mining equipment, it's attached to our hull. How did primitives bypass our sensors with industrial tools? The answer was already tearing through his ship as the electromagnetic pulse cascaded through power systems that had never been designed to handle feedback from their own weapons. The Vorth plasma cannons, charged to maximum capacity and ready to fire, became bombs inside their own vessels as the EMP overload turned contained energy into uncontrolled destruction. On the bridge of the UES Defiance, Lieutenant Commander Hayes watched his tactical display in awe as 50 red icons representing the most feared military force in the galaxy began flickering and disappearing. Admiral, we're detecting massive internal explosions throughout the Vorth fleet. Their power systems are cascading failures across all ships. Sir, it's working. The EMP attack is actually working. Admiral Korik allowed himself one moment of savage satisfaction as he watched alien battlecruisers, each one capable of destroying planets, begin to tear themselves apart from within. The plan that had seemed insane by every conventional measure was succeeding beyond their most optimistic projections. The Vorth's technological superiority had become their weakness, their methodical nature, their downfall, and their dismissal of human ingenuity, their death sentence. Chief Engineer Nash stared at his readings in wonder, his voice filled with scientific excitement and human triumph. The magnetic polarization effect worked perfectly. The EMP discharge hit their power conduits at exactly the moment of maximum energy flow. Their own weapons are destroying them from the inside out. Throughout the Vorth fleet, the same nightmare scenario played out on ship after ship. Plasma conduits designed to channel devastating energy toward enemy targets instead became conduits for their own destruction. The electromagnetic pulses had found the one moment of vulnerability in systems that were otherwise impervious to conventional attack, turning the aliens' greatest strength into a weapon of mass suicide. Hierarchus Zeth tried desperately to coordinate damage control, but his communication systems were failing as more ships succumbed to internal explosions. The fleet that had crushed 19 civilizations was experiencing something they had never encountered. Total systemic failure caused by an enemy they had completely underestimated. "Fleet status report!" Zeth screamed over alarms that wailed like dying creatures throughout his command center. "Hierarchist, we've lost 47 ships to internal explosions. The remaining 3 are suffering critical system failures. Our weapons are offline, our engines are failing, and our hull integrity is compromised. Sir, the humans, they used our own technology against us." The terrible beauty of the human trap revealed itself as Zeth realized the magnitude of the deception. The mining drones hadn't been weapons at all. They had been delivery systems for a vulnerability that existed only during the few seconds when Vorth ships were most confident in their power. The mammals had studied their technology, identified its weakness, and turned the Vorth's methodical nature into a fatal flaw. Commander Stone watched from his bridge as the last alien battlecruiser succumbed to the cascade failures that had already claimed 49 of its companions. "Admiral, the Vorth fleet is completely destroyed. We're detecting no functional weapons, no active engines, no communication signals." "Sir, we actually did it. We beat them." In the Geneva bunker, the tactical display showed a debris field where moments before the galaxy's most feared military force had hung in space like harbingers of humanity's extinction. 50 battlecruisers had been reduced to floating scrap metal by mining equipment that had been dismissed as harmless industrial tools. The intercom crackled with Hierarchus Zeth's final transmission, his voice carrying a note of dawning understanding and grudging respect. "Clever mammals, you used our strength against us. You turned our weapons into our destruction. How did we not see?" The transmission cut to static as the Annihilator's reactor containment failed, adding the brightest explosion to the growing constellation of Vorth defeat spreading across the asteroid belt. The species that had come to demonstrate the futility of resistance against superior technology had instead learned that technological superiority meant nothing when facing an enemy clever enough to make that technology self-defeating. Admiral Korik stood in the command bunker, surrounded by officers whose faces showed the same mixture of disbelief and triumph that he felt coursing through his own veins. They had gambled everything on a plan that defied conventional wisdom, and they had won not through superior firepower, but through superior understanding of their enemy's weaknesses. All stations, this is Admiral Korik. The Vorth Expeditionary Force has been completely destroyed. Earth is safe. The threat to humanity has been eliminated. He paused, letting the magnitude of their victory sink in. Today we proved that intelligence and adaptability can overcome any technological advantage. Today we showed the galaxy what happens when you underestimate human ingenuity. The impossible had become reality, and the species that had faced extinction had instead become the authors of their enemy's destruction. Admiral, you need to see this immediately. The data we're pulling from the Vorth wreckage, it changes everything. Intelligence Officer Marcus Webb burst into the Geneva Command Center, his face flushed with excitement and disbelief as he clutched a data tablet containing information that would reshape humanity's understanding of the galaxy. Admiral Korik turned from the tactical display where he had been studying the debris field that had once been the Vorth Expeditionary Force, 50 battle cruisers reduced to floating scrap metal by human ingenuity and alien overconfidence. "What did you find, Marcus?" Korik asked, though something in Webb's expression told him the answer would be bigger than either of them had dared hope. "Sir, the Vorth weren't lying when they said they'd analyzed our defensive capabilities. Their computers contain detailed intelligence on every human colony, every military installation, every ship in our fleet. But, Admiral, they also contain their own strategic assessments, and the picture they paint of the Vorth Empire is nothing like what we expected." Webb activated the holographic display, showing a three-dimensional map of Vorth space that stretched across dozens of star systems. This expeditionary force that just tried to exterminate us, it represented 20% of their total deep space naval capacity. The implications hit Korik like a physical blow. 20%? You're telling me that 50 ships was a significant portion of their entire military? More than significant, sir. It was a massive commitment of resources. The Vorth Empire has been fighting simultaneous campaigns across multiple fronts for the past decade. They're stretched thin, overextended, and according to their own strategic assessments, they're losing more ships than they can replace. Webb pulled up another display showing Vorth force deployments across known space. "Look at this, Admiral. They have skeleton forces defending their core territories while their main fleets are scattered across distant conquest campaigns. They gambled everything on quick victories to maintain the illusion of invincibility." Chief Engineer Nash entered the command center, his clothes still stained with coolant fluid from the recovery operations on the Vorth wreckage. "Admiral, the technology we're recovering from those ships is beyond anything we imagined. Their navigation computers, their communication systems, their weapon designs. We're looking at centuries of advancement that we can reverse engineer and improve upon." Korik studied the strategic map with the cold calculation of a chess master who had just realized his opponent's weakness. The Vorth had built their empire on psychological warfare and technological intimidation, but underneath that facade lay the same vulnerability that plagued every expanding power: overextension. They had committed their forces to maintaining control over dozens of conquered species while simultaneously launching new conquest campaigns, leaving themselves vulnerable to the one thing they had never expected: effective resistance. "Marcus, what's the status of Vorth communications across their empire?" "That's the beautiful part, sir. We're intercepting everything. Their communication protocols assumed their expeditionary forces were invincible, so they never implemented security measures for the scenario where an entire fleet could be captured intact. We have access to their command frequencies, their supply chain coordination, their strategic planning networks. We can see everything they're doing, and they have no idea we're listening." Lieutenant Commander Hayes looked up from his console with growing excitement. Admiral, we're detecting massive communication traffic throughout Vorth space. It appears news of the fleet's destruction is spreading through their networks, and the reaction is significant. We're seeing what appears to be panic responses from multiple Vorth command centers. Korik felt a familiar cold calm that came when tactical opportunity aligned with strategic necessity. The Vorth had made one fatal mistake. They had approached humanity as they had approached 19 other species, with methodical confidence and predictable tactics. They had never considered the possibility that their victims might be clever enough to turn the tables. "Gentlemen, we're not going to waste this opportunity," Korik announced, his voice carrying the authority of a commander who had just seen the bigger picture. "Webb, I want detailed analysis of every Vorth supply base, communication hub, and weakly defended installation within striking distance. Nash, begin immediate reverse engineering of their navigation and weapon systems. Hayes, prepare orders for Operation Counterstrike." "Operation Counterstrike, sir." "We're going to hit them while they're reeling from this defeat." The Vorth built their empire on the assumption that inferior species would cower and surrender when faced with superior technology. Time to show them what happens when an inferior species refuses to play by their rules. Webb pulled up targeting data from the captured Vorth computers, his voice filled with anticipation. "Admiral, we've identified 17 Vorth supply bases within our operational range. According to their own assessments, most are defended by skeleton forces, maybe 2 or 3 ships each. They never expected to need heavy defenses in rear areas. Because no one has ever successfully counterattacked them before," Korik said grimly. "Nash, how quickly can we modify our remaining ships with Vorth technology? Give me 72 hours and I can upgrade our weapon systems, improve our engines, and integrate their navigation computers into our existing ships. We'll still be outnumbered, but we'll have technological parity for the first time in 18 months. Commander Stone entered the command center, his face showing the exhaustion and exhilaration of someone who had just helped save humanity. "Admiral, the recovery teams have completed salvage operations on the Vorth Rex. We've recovered enough technology to revolutionize human civilization, enough intelligence to map their entire empire, and enough proof of their vulnerability to change the balance of power in this galaxy." Korik walked to the observation window showing Earth hanging in space, no longer threatened by alien annihilation, but transformed into the center of something much larger. The planet that had been targeted for extinction was about to become the headquarters of a counteroffensive that would shake the foundations of Vorth power. "Gentlemen, 18 months ago, the Vorth began a campaign to eliminate humanity because they saw us as a threat to galactic stability. They were right to be afraid, but not for the reasons they thought. We're not a threat because we expand too quickly or consume too many resources. We're a threat because we refuse to accept that superior technology equals inevitable victory." Webb looked up from his intelligence analysis, his eyes bright with possibility. "Admiral, the intercepted communications are showing something unprecedented. Other species under Vorth control are requesting information about how we defeated their fleet. They want to know if our tactics can be adapted to their situations. And can they be?" "Absolutely, sir. The principle is universal. Study your enemy's technology, identify its vulnerabilities, then use their strengths against them. Every species has unique capabilities that could exploit different aspects of Vorth weaknesses." Korik nodded, understanding that humanity had accidentally started something much larger than a simple military victory. They had proven that the Vorth could be beaten, and that proof was spreading across the galaxy like wildfire. "Begin preparations for Operation Counterstrike, but also begin preparations for something bigger. We're not just going to hit their supply bases. We're going to teach every enslaved species in Vorth space how to turn their oppressors' technology against them." The Vorth wanted to eliminate humanity to preserve galactic stability. Instead, they're about to discover what real instability looks like when an entire galaxy refuses to stay conquered. "Admiral Korik, we're receiving confirmation from the Altarian Liberation Fleet. The Vorth garrison at Kepler 438 has fallen. That makes it official. Every species that was conquered by the Vorth in the last century has successfully rebelled and achieved independence." 6 months after the 10-minute battle that had changed the galaxy, Admiral Korik stood in what had once been a simple military command bunker, and was now the headquarters of the most successful liberation movement in galactic history. The cramped underground facility beneath Geneva had been transformed into a sprawling coordination center where former enemies worked alongside former victims to systematically dismantle the Vorth Empire that had dominated known space for centuries. "Marcus, give me the final count," Korik requested, turning to Intelligence Officer Webb, who had become humanity's foremost expert on galactic liberation tactics. 23 species have achieved complete independence from Vorth control, Admiral. 15 more are in active rebellion using tactics adapted from our success here at Earth. The Vorth Empire, which controlled over 300 star systems 6 months ago, now holds maybe 30 systems in scattered, isolated pockets. They've gone from galactic dominators to galactic refugees in less than a year. Commander Stone looked up from his engineering station, where he was coordinating technical assistance to newly liberated species across the galaxy. The beauty of it is that each species found their own way to exploit Vorth weaknesses. The Altarians used their natural electromagnetic abilities to overload Vorth shield generators. The Centaurians turned their mining equipment into kinetic weapons that punched through Vorth armor. Every rebellion was unique, but they all followed the same principle we discovered. Intelligence beats superior technology. Korik walked to the massive holographic display that now showed the galaxy not as Vorth territory to be conquered, but as a network of free species working together to ensure that no single empire could ever again threaten their independence. The transformation had been swift and total, driven by something the Vorth had never anticipated, the power of an idea whose time had come. Chief Engineer Nash entered the command center, carrying a data tablet that contained the latest technical reports from across liberated space. "Admiral, the technological sharing program is exceeding all projections. We're not just reverse engineering Vorth equipment anymore. We're improving on it. The combined scientific knowledge of 23 previously enslaved species is producing advances that none of us could have achieved alone." "Show me," Korik said, though he already knew the answer would be remarkable. The Rigelians' understanding of energy manipulation, combined with human engineering principles and Altarian electromagnetic theory, has produced weapon systems that are 30% more efficient than anything the Vorth ever built. But more importantly, we're focusing on defensive and exploration technologies rather than conquest equipment. We're building a galaxy that can defend itself without becoming an empire. The intercom crackled with an incoming transmission from Captain Morrison, who had survived the fall of New Sparta colony and now commanded the liberation fleet in the former Vorth core territories. "Admiral, we've just received a formal surrender request from the remaining Vorth High Command. They're asking for asylum in exchange for complete technological disclosure and assistance in transitioning their remaining territories to independent governance." Korik considered the request with the careful deliberation that had become his trademark since that desperate day when 50 alien battlecruisers had threatened Earth's existence. The species that had come to exterminate humanity was now begging for humanity's protection, not from external enemies, but from the galaxy full of former slaves who had learned that their oppressors could be defeated. "What's the status of the remaining Vorth population, Morrison?" "Approximately 50 million individuals scattered across isolated colonies, Admiral. Most are civilians who had nothing to do with the conquest campaigns. They're requesting relocation assistance to uninhabited systems where they can rebuild their civilization without threatening anyone else." Lieutenant Commander Hayes looked up from his communications console with something approaching amazement in his voice. "Sir, we're receiving messages from species we've never even heard of, requesting membership in what they're calling the Terran Alliance. Apparently, word of our liberation philosophy has spread beyond former Vorth space. There are civilizations offering to join us voluntarily." The irony was profound and beautiful. The Vorth had attacked humanity because they feared human expansion would threaten galactic stability. Instead, humanity's response to that attack had created the most stable galactic civilization in recorded history, not through conquest or intimidation, but through the simple principle that intelligent cooperation could overcome any challenge. Dr. Sarah Chen, humanity's new ambassador for interspecies relations, entered the command center with a smile that spoke of diplomatic victories beyond anything they had dared imagine. Admiral, the Galactic Independence Council has voted unanimously to establish permanent headquarters here on Earth. Representatives from 47 species want to make our world the center of ongoing cooperation and mutual defense. Korik walked to the observation deck that now overlooked not just the Swiss Alps, but a vast spaceport where ships from dozens of worlds arrived daily seeking alliance, trade agreements, or simply the knowledge that they were part of something larger than themselves. The sight never failed to amaze him. Vessels whose designs defied human understanding of physics, piloted by beings whose biology ranged from crystalline hive minds to gaseous intelligence clouds, all united by their shared commitment to freedom and cooperation. Webb, final assessment. Is the Vorth threat completely eliminated? As a military threat, absolutely, Admiral. As a species, they're actually becoming valuable contributors to galactic civilization. Turns out that when you remove the imperial ideology and the pressure to constantly expand, the Vorth are quite skilled at technological research and peaceful development. Several liberated worlds have requested Vorth scientific advisors to help with reconstruction efforts. Commander Stone pulled up a holographic map showing the current state of the galaxy, where green icons representing free worlds vastly outnumbered the few red dots indicating the last unconquered territories. The psychological impact has been as important as the military victory, Admiral. Every species in the galaxy now knows that technological superiority doesn't guarantee victory, that cooperation is stronger than conquest, and that intelligence and adaptability can overcome any advantage. Admiral Korik stood surrounded by officers and diplomats representing a dozen different species, all working together in the command center that had once coordinated humanity's desperate last stand. The weight of 8 billion lives that had once pressed down on his shoulders had been replaced by something far more inspiring: the responsibility of helping to guide a galactic civilization built on the principles of freedom, cooperation, and mutual respect. Gentlemen, ladies, beings of all classifications, Korik addressed the diverse group around him. 6 months ago, the Vorth came to Earth with a simple message. Our world would be erased because our expansion threatened galactic stability. Today, we've proven that expansion doesn't have to mean conquest, that strength doesn't have to mean domination, and that the greatest victories come not from superior firepower, but from superior principles. Dr. Chen activated the main display, showing real-time communications from across the galaxy, where 47 species work together on projects ranging from terraforming lifeless worlds to exploring unknown regions of space. The Terran Alliance now represents the largest voluntary cooperation in galactic history, Admiral. And it all started because one human admiral refused to accept that superior technology equals inevitable defeat. As the sun set over the Swiss Alps, casting long shadows across the spaceport where former enemies worked alongside former victims to build a better galaxy, Korik reflected on the journey that had brought them to this moment. The Vorth's threat of erasure had become humanity's opportunity for transformation, and their demonstration of superior technology had become the catalyst for the greatest liberation in galactic history. The species that had faced extinction had instead become the guardians of galactic freedom, proving that sometimes the greatest victories come not from winning wars, but from winning the peace that follows. Intelligence and adaptation had triumphed over technological superiority, and the galaxy would never be the same. The impossible had become inevitable, and the stars beckoned with infinite possibility for all who chose cooperation over conquest. If this story gave you goosebumps, smash that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. Now we want to hear from you. If you could turn any piece of everyday technology into a weapon against an alien invasion, what would you choose, and how would you use it? Mining drones saved Earth. What's your brilliant plan? Drop your tactical genius in the comments below. We read every single one and love seeing your creative strategies.